This is a memoir called Return of the Rings. There's just a few very slight changes to names of people. I got more than I bargained for when I went to college in England in the 1970s. I met Sadie and fell in love. Sadie was lovely, a bright English literature student with Joan Baez-like long straight hair, who was in love with me and was prepared to go off to the wilds of Ireland to rescue a family farm from a heartless bank. She was Penelope to my Odysseus, Bonnie to my Clyde. There was no limit to what I would do for her and she for me. I adored her. Therefore, cashing in ahead of pigs, our stake for the future, the value then of a house, albeit a small one, and buying beautiful, expensive, custom-made rings was unquestionable to us. In our universe, there was plenty of time, energy, and opportunity to achieve everything. What could not be foreseen then was that some years on, to hurt and humiliate Sadie, I would steal those same rings from her. But I got ahead of myself. I was slated to be a farmer in Ireland when I left school in the early 1960s. Although to the manner born, all agreed I'd make a good farmer, there was trouble. I rebelled. I rebelled a lot. Oddly, for the eldest son in a farm family, I railed against the primogeniture regime, that is, that the eldest son inherited the farm. I demanded equality for my siblings. As a fairly well-read teenager, my father cursed me for always having my head stuck in a book. Wider horizons beckoned. The tipping point came when my childhood sweetheart wrote me a Dear John letter. She had a better option in a broth of a lad with a higher rateable valuation than mine, that is, a larger farm. Oh, and yes, he was at college. Heartbroken, my world crashed. At times like that, it's hard to see anything but total bleakness. We haven't the wisdom then to see another door opening. But somehow, with a little bit of luck, I saw my chance and I was out the gap. England beckoned. I was away. Goodbye, cows. I really quite hated those scutter-plastered bovines. Goodbye to the medieval labour of sugar beet and never-ending hedging, and the other endless, grinding chores. I cashed in my meagre chips, a horse, tackle for same, a bullock, and some near-barren pedigree sows. Hello, the unknown. London. A job that didn't break your back. A career, perhaps. New relationships. Sex. Staggered at the multitude of available jobs and with my stake, able to be patient, I talked my way into working for a multinational company. Impressed with my Latin and Greek from my monastery local day school, and history subjects, the personnel officer at the Nestle company ignored my bog accent and other raw edges and threw me in at the deep end. It was an exciting, challenging milieu, gloriously far, far from the madding cows. I drank in greedily all that was on offer work-wise, socially and culturally. Finding Joyce, James Joyce, in a penguin-only bookshop marked my coming of age. I was so taken that I was at the premiere of Ulysses in 1967. I shook hands with Milo Shea, T.P. McKenna, and kissed, on the cheek, Barbara Jefford, the deliciously sexy Molly Bloom. Oh, happy, happy days. To complete the idyll, all I needed was a real-life Molly Bloom. That was still some distance away, but the near misses were, in the meantime, tantalizing. I took up poetry, a remedy for unrequited love. What to do next? It was utterly intoxicating. There was so much going on. Galleries, art galleries, the Clancy brothers, my fellow Tipperary men, in the Royal Albert Hall. Exhibitions, Jimi Hendrix, Chuck Berry, other museums, Dominic Behan, Rod Stewart. Classical guitar I found insanely beautiful. I was within 10 feet of Segovia at one recital, front row at a Julian Bream gig. It was all mind-bending. And then I did meet my Molly Bloom, a German Molly Bloom. Poetry was dropped. Tossing career job and studies aside, I bought a guitar, let the hair grow, tie-dyed a t-shirt, and segued into the counterculture. After the epoch-changing Rolling Stones concert in Hyde Park in 1969, my gorgeous Mädchen and I, loaded with rucksacks, headed for the fatherland. Ah, those were the days, my friend, we thought they'd never end. But of course, end they did. She dumped me over a slight, very slight, honestly, indiscretion on my part. I was heartbroken. Again. But at least I had college and a career to take up. After returning to London, I knuckled down, completed a course I'd previously embarked on, and got a few university offers. I was going to be an agricultural economist and solve world hunger. Eureka! This is where I'm meant to be, I exulted as I entered the ivy-walled traditional quad of St. Patrick's Hall, University of Reading. Life was good, particularly with a full mature student's grant. Pints at the Union Bar were but a shilling. I was a good student. I won several Yard of Ale drinking competitions. In this heightened, intoxicating atmosphere, I fell in love. Again. I met Sadie one evening, as these things happen, whilst looking for somebody else. Cross-legged on the floor of her room in a women-only hall of residence, she interrogated me with an impatient, "Yes?" She was a child of her times. Aforedescribed hair, large glasses, also Joan Baez-like, woolly jumper and flared jeans. With a book in hand, she exuded an almost haughty air. This was misleading, though, I was to discover. She was just absorbed in her book, away with fairies, and hadn't quite come into land yet. But I was enslaved. She swept me off my feet, almost literally later. Could that woman bop? She proposed to me a year on. That's how it was then, the dawn of feminism. I heartily accepted. We postponed the getting of rings, we agreed, until we would come into some decent money. Later, I persuaded her to join me in Ireland. See, I needed to take a sabbatical and go back home. My parents were getting scary letters from the bank, which was threatening foreclosure on the farm. The plan was to sort this out and then return to our respective further studies and careers. My fiance's introduction to Ireland was eased by her doing a master's in Anglo-Irish Studies at UCD. When I was able to join her, we gorged like vultures on all the culture that Dublin presented. There would be leaner times, we realised, arts-wise, ahead of us in the countryside. The tasks on the farm were no less grinding than in my youth, but easier now to put up with as we were all pulling together. But money was very tight. Everything was pooled. But I was allowed one enterprise on the side. I bought 60 young pigs. I scrounged and foraged to feed them. They were accidentally, organically fed pigs. Originally, they were intended to pay for Sadie's postgraduate studies, but a fortunate, well-paid steeplejack job. I dangled over an abyss, clearing ivy from a castle for 5 weeks. Financed that. The day came when the not-so-little piggies went to market. I didn't like this part at all, but to falter now would be to face ridicule. A farmer who couldn't take his animals to market? It was a bloody awful day. I steeled myself as I herded, with due feigned indifference, these unsuspecting friends of mine onto the factory lorry. I'd even given the creatures names. Okay, Gollum wasn't my favourite, but I balked at the thought of his throat being cut. I was their Dr. Mengele. The following week, the factory manager saw fit to personally deliver the cheque, blood money, and grading details. I suppose he saw me as a potential up-and-coming producer who, with the right guidance, could go on to be a steady supplier to his establishment. My pigs, now limp sides of pale pork, waiting to be smoked and turned into rashers, sausages and puddings, had not graded well. Although they were super healthy and well fed, they ranged in size and shape from barrels to greyhounds. I cut the man's lecture short by insisting he quickly tell me the cheque total. I knew exactly how much out-of-pocket expenses the pigs had cost me. £1,000, give or take a few bob. The 3,800-odd cheque caused me to punch the air. Well, hey, that's 10 times the national gross margin for fattened pigs. The manager went away scratching his head. We were rich, After my borrowings were paid off, there was 2,800 to spend. For the first time, Sadie and I did have some decent money. A house of our own would have been sensible. A self-build on the site we'd acquired could have been done for about £3,000. My beloved's eyes lit up, however, when I suggested we go down the romantic road to a renowned goldsmith nearby and have our rings made. The craftsman invited us to visit him at his home workshop. He welcomed our input into the design, and after a later second session, we had consensus. A strong, broad, angular wedding ring for me, a similar but narrower wedding band for herself. The engagement ring was a stunning solitaire diamond mounted in a shouldered setting. I collected them several weeks later. The German goldsmith was proud of his work. "This job's been a pleasure, but the cost, I'm afraid, is higher than I thought. £2,800. You see, the diamond to match the strong ring design had to be of a good carat size and colour. £2,800 was over 100 times a labourer's weekly wage in the early 70s. And the actual amount? Quite a coincidence. I had the fleeting thought that the jeweller had conspired with the bacon factory. Momentarily I gulped, but it was okay. The extravagant purchase of such rings reflected our undying commitment to each other. It also helped assuage my trauma over the pigs. They died in a noble cause. We had timed the collection of the jewellery to coincide with my fiancé's birthday. We decided to make a night of it, a ceremony by candlelight in a fancy restaurant. We would have dinner, and I would present her with the rings. Eventually. I wasn't telling her everything. There was a ritual to be observed first. The ritual originated when she had proposed to me back at college one glorious morning. It had been my birthday. She sat firmly on my chest and gave me a series of gifts. She held back the last one, the seventh, which, guessing by its shape and weight, was a book. "You have to marry me to get this one," she demanded. Curiosity got the better of me. She chose great books. So I agreed, thinking what could possibly go wrong with such a loving, kind, thoughtful, and oh so generous partner. 7 gifts and a student stipend. And we loved each other anyway. Even if I never got a degree, this was the height of success in my estimation. What could be more important than landing a great life partner? I can't remember what the title of the last present book was, but it might have been The Confessions of Felix Krull, Confidence Man, which I know I read that first month I was home from England. Maybe feeling just a little wistful that I was not on an outrageous and rakish world tour like man's picaresque Felix. Incidentally, knowing that book well led me to a row later on with a Danish friend of Sadie's, someone who classed himself as an expert on the German writer. A man's man? Anyway, back to the formal engagement dinner. In those days, the fanciest eatery around was a place called Kittler's Inn, named after a notorious witch. So we made a reservation there, the slight frisson of its dark history adding spice to our celebration. Although we had ploughman's appetites then, to be sure to get our value, we prepared for dinner at the much vaunted restaurant by fasting from breakfast. The all-day abstinence was not a good idea. Our stomachs had shrunk. We couldn't finish our main courses. We had to take away substantial doggy bags. Odd though, like children, we seemed to have separate stomachs for dessert. The house special was a challenging 7-tiered chocolate gâteau. I think I eat some of hers as well as mine, but then I'm a pig. It was time for the presentation, but I wanted to tease. I preempted her excited expectation of the rings by placing a shopping bag on the table. One after the other, I took out and gave her 6 gifts, at least 2 of them books. With her, there just had to be some books. She was thrilled. This was the first time that I had acted out her college days proposal ceremony. The rings, of course, were last. They looked very beautiful, spilled from their suede pouch onto the starched linen tablecloth. There were tears of joy as she put on the engagement ring. The lovely gem sparkled in the candlelight, as only a good diamond does. There was applause. We'd been unwittingly the centre of attention to fellow diners for some time. We poured champagne and shared it around. We felt like $1 million. Time went by. We got married. Our self-organised registry office wedding in a cathedral city in England was very special. Even my uber-Catholic mother was won over by the occasion. She's so nice for a Protestant. My father never had the least reservations. She's a gorgeous girl, you lucky devil. He was also impressed with the free bar at the reception, courtesy of Sadie's father. Things went well for us, went well for my parents and the farm too. We'd exited farming on the back of a large potato crop bonanza, having solved most of the problems on the farm that had drawn us back to Ireland. Mission accomplished. We could have gone back to England with dignity. But I had become a serial, reasonably successful entrepreneur, and Sadie was quite content to go along with my schemes. We bought a large central building in the local county town. We developed an impressive bookshop over 2 floors and a basement. We got involved in cultural activities in the area. We started a literary group and a film society. I helped found a historical society. This became my ambit, late in the 90s, going back to college to do history. The bookshop was really Sadie's business, her dream, and she made a great job of it. I wasn't particularly interested in retailing, and certainly the bookkeeping involved was anathema to me. It was just as well then that she was very competent at it and able to take in her stride the newfangled VAT. I gladly ceded the ground to her in these areas. But I kept a grip on the financials to ensure a profitable course. Easy for a book lover to get carried away with too large a stock of books. It wasn't all just business and accounts for me, though. I found an abiding interest in antiquarian books and publishing. One farmer friend summed it all up for me. "Begad, man, you're on the pig's back and you're lucky to be in out of the rain, you devil." And then our son was born, and a more lively, handsome and healthy kid you never saw. The gods were smiling on us. Sadie had become involved in the early women's movement and had various groups on the go. A bookshop, especially in a town without a library at the time, became a hub for all sorts of activities. This was a rich period in our lives. We were both continually doing new things and meeting interesting people. One such, I'll call her Peggy, was a young farmer with sound tastes in literature. In a serious bookshop, one can't help but become biased towards customers with good taste. I liked Peggy with her intelligence and her no-nonsense, working country girl clothes and breezy personality. She was not at all my cup of tea in the physical attraction stakes. No grounds for Sadie to be jealous, but she definitely could be included in our dinner party invitations. And she was, and she didn't disappoint. Apart from anything else, I could talk farming, even pigs to her. She and her family reared thousands of pigs. We both became close to Peggy. One day, in a rush to consult with Sadie, I burst in on her and Peggy in our sitting room atop the bookshop. They were squatting on the floor, facing each other, foreheads almost touching, eyes closed. A smokingly intimate scene. I was shocked, but didn't react there and then. I got my query answered and fled, in some confusion. Later, I exploded. "You're just imagining what's not there," she said. Jim, it's preposterous. I'm not a lesbian, and neither is Peggy. And she was, after all, your friend first." She went on. Later, "You're becoming paranoid. I love you as always, but ominously, maybe you should see a psychiatrist." I was confused and angry. I sank into depression and drank more than I should have. But then things sorted themselves out, to some degree. Sadie suddenly disappeared, without explanation. I was sick with worry. On the cusp of calling the Gardaí, she rang. Not able to find words for her new reality, she shakily and obviously to me lied. She was not a plausible liar. She came back, but I hardly knew this person. Later, all pretense dropped. Sadie went to live full-time with her new friend. From then on, there was obviously no going back. It took a while to take in that was the case. There could never, ever be a return to normal. She was a full-blown gay woman. Nobody was to blame. Maybe. It was just the fall of the sexual orientation dice. Maybe. But I was no forgiving new man. I was in utter turmoil. I had some pretty bad thoughts. Our former life together, seemed to me to have been utterly devalued, destroyed. I thought she had always been deceitful, living a lie. I should disappear. She should disappear. Eschewing worse, I took a sneaky revenge on her via the rings. She took them off one day in the bookshop. At this stage, she was working for me as a bookkeeper. I came across the rings and, in a vicious impulse, took them. I wouldn't say anything unless she made a big issue over them. She didn't. When she couldn't find them, apparently, she was too embarrassed to make a fuss. I determined to sell them and buy something macho and self-indulgent. A yacht, perhaps, or a long career break abroad. We separated. Divorce was almost impossible in Ireland back then, and she got her share of property and all the other safeguards and entitlements that her solicitor could come up with. I think she and he thought there was a strong possibility I would go off the rails. There were certainly good family precedents on my side for doing that, for hitting the bottle particularly. Of course, she was still the good, decent, lovely, moral, thoughtful, intelligent human being she had always been. And she was an exemplary mother. It was therefore relatively easy to be civilized about access to her son and other arrangements. Sheltering our then 3-year-old from the situation was an abiding priority for both of us. Fast forwarding 15 years or so, Sadie had moved to Dublin and retrained in psychotherapy. I had eventually got out of retailing and became an organic farmer and activist here in the southwest, notably without animals. Sadie developed ovarian cancer, had a major operation, and was very ill. I was shocked to my roots. I wanted to help, but didn't quite know what to do. I went to see her in hospital. She was pale and frail, but she looked me straight in the eye and said there was something I could help her with. "Get my bloody mother off my back!" I was so relieved to be of use and to hear her strength. This lady was going to fight the cancer and survive. Her dear mother, loving her only daughter to bits, was frantic and upsetting everybody. I took her mother and father off to a hotel and generally distracted them. Afterwards, we were on a new plateau in our relationship, so much so that when she had recovered, she invited me to come to Dublin and meet her in one of our old haunts, a bookshop cafe. Following the preliminaries, she thanked me again profusely for handling her mother for her during the crisis. She had a gift for me to express her gratitude. A book. What else? It was some weeks on from her birthday, and although I had ignored many in-between birthdays, apart from a card perhaps, I had presents with me this time. "I have something for you too," I said, taking a parcel from my bag. I can't remember what it was. It was carefully chosen, though, and nicely wrapped. Usually I was not the best at wrapping. That was her forte. She turned it over and over, her face lighting up, eyes betraying a tear. "I'm so touched you remembered." Then, with a little levity, "And did you wrap it yourself?" "Yep." "You've improved." I'd accepted her offer of coffee and carrot cake, and with thirst slaked and mouthful, I told her I had another present for her. Now, she was really surprised, even blushing when I produced a book, quite a decent one too, bearing in mind how difficult she was to buy for her. "You're not the only one who can pick the right book," I crowed. By the time the third gift was produced, she knew something familiar was in train. She didn't need the fourth, fifth, and sixth present to realize that an enactment of sorts was taking place. I was building towards a crescendo. So by the sixth present, she was becoming impatient to get to the denouement. "Okay," she said. "Come on. So, what's the seventh?" This said aggressively. She was well on the way to recovery. I hadn't thought it out that deeply in advance, but as I said before, I'm a teaser, an inveterate teaser. Growing up with three sisters makes you one. I was enjoying myself. I was on a blinder. To prolong proceedings, I took a breather just then. I need the loo. When I came back, the atmosphere changed. I guessed she had peeked into the bag and was now disappointed that there wasn't the pivotal, the crucial seventh gift. She had obviously been crediting me with remembering the ritual properly. "Have another coffee. It's still my treat," she said, with only the faintest hint of disappointment. "Yeah, grand. The coffee's great," I said as I accepted it. It was bloody awful stuff, really. Pushing my luck, I asked, "Can I have another piece of carrot cake, please?" I still had that other stomach. She was trying not to let on, but she was tired and not a little deflated. "Maybe I'm being over-sentimental here, but I just thought," she said, "you might have fulfilled the little custom we used to have." "Custom? What custom? You expected more?" I fainted, but thinking, Christ, enough. Now I've gone too far. She'd never been as tolerant, long-suffering as my dear sisters. Actually, I do remember our wee tradition. There is indeed one more present. Her face showed relief, a childlike hope, maybe, that good old Santa had remembered everything. I rummaged in the bag. One last lingering deceit. I really can be a bastard. It's not here," I said. And then, patting my pockets, I finally allowed it to dawn that there might be something else after all. I took out the small drawstring poke from an inside pocket. It bore the name and trademark of the ring's maker. I slid the rings out onto the checkered oilcloth. The diamond sparkled its inner fire, defying the wan light of a winter afternoon. She was gobsmacked. The dear woman was trying to grasp the outrageous truth. It was I who had stolen her rings. I took them to hurt her. Now I was returning them. I didn't ever want to hurt her again. I thought there would be tears, from me as well as from her, but strangely there weren't. we were just quiet. There's a sequel. Sadie lived in Dublin with her current partner, not Peggy, for decades. Their house was broken into. The Gardaí reckoned it was a professional job, from the way files from cabinets were emptied onto the floor. The rings had been hidden in a file. Now, Sadie thought, they were really gone for good. But they weren't. When the thugs upended the files, the little jeweler's poke skittered silently across the wooden floor, lodging under a cabinet. There it was found a few days later during the clear-up. Wherever the rings be, and they are now just across the peninsula from me, where Sadie and her partner, now her wife, have retired to. The rings will always stand for me as signifying a very special time in our lives, a time when we were young, cocky, brimful of confidence, ambition, and love, and could, with those wonderful pieces of jewellery, make the grand, extravagant, and romantic gesture in defiance of the temptations of rectitude and practicality. I guess my son, our son, will one day inherit the rings. When he listens to this, he will know properly where they come from. I'm thinking of getting some heritage pigs. You know, the black and brown fellas, sometimes called Tamworth pigs or saddlebacks, something of that order. And I'm going to let them roam and live naturally in my overgrown woods. I think I owe them.